want to do something today that makes me feel very scared. And I'm doing it in English because I don't want to lock anyone out of hearing this. And there aren't that many Dutch people, so that's why. I want to be sharing a part of my story with you, part of my testimony, as it were, actually of some things that I've been through and what God has done for me. So if you're not interested in hearing that, just don't listen to it, because it's going to be my personal experience and I don't want to force anything on anyone. It's just I want to tell you what I've been through and what God has done for me. And if there's just one person that has to hear this and feels a connection to my story, and I can help you in this way to inspire you or to show you something that might be a solution for you, then I'm very, very happy. So that's why I'm doing it. And there are going to be some really dark details to my story. And I don't want to focus on that, but I feel like I have to explain everything to fully let you understand what God has pulled me out of. And I'm not going to tell you everything like I said, because there are some details and some parts of this story of my life that I don't really feel ready to share with everyone. Some parts are a little unresolved, and I want to focus on mental health and parts of physical health, because I think it's important and not a lot of people are talking about it. More and more actually in the media and everywhere, but this is just my experience and I hope you can get something out of it. So I have been sad for a long time, and with sad I mean really, really sad. I always had a feeling as if I didn't belong and people didn't like me. I got bullied and I just felt like I was left out, and I was so lonely all the time. And this resulted in me getting my first depression when I was only 8 years old. And for a kid that young to get a depression, that's weird. It shouldn't be like that. I should have been playing outside, I should have been making friends, I should have been happy and careless, or carefree, not careless. But I wasn't, and I was just so sad. I felt like no one wanted me to be there, and I felt like no one liked me, and I felt like I didn't belong, and I felt like I wasn't just meant to live at all. And I remember writing in my diary that I felt like I didn't want to live anymore. And I was 8 years old. I just didn't want to live anymore. My parents found out. They just took me from school and I stayed home for a little bit. We went on a little vacation and it was very nice to be with my parents, just because I had such a strong bond with my mom, and she was my everything. I loved her so much. It was a bit unhealthy at some points, but she was just so important for me. And because they took me from school, People thought, oh, she's going on a vacation, that's nice. But when you're depressed, nothing is nice. Nothing is fun. You're not happy. You can do all of the nicest things in the world, but you will not feel that way. I didn't want to do anything. I felt so lost. At only 8 years old, I felt so lost. And I didn't know what to do. But the little vacation helped. And after a while, I had to get back to school again. And so I did, and it didn't really get better. I switched schools and I still didn't really fit in. And to be honest, I was a weird kid. I know I was. I was a little messed up. I had issues. So I understand that kids at that time didn't really like me and didn't accept me and didn't want me to be their friend. And some kids maybe were scared of me. I don't know, but everything was just wrong at that time. And this continued as I went on with school, and I just didn't belong, and I got lonely, and the sadness came back. It actually never went away fully, but it just got worse, and I started acting out as a teenager, still being very strange, this very weird person. And I didn't love myself. I didn't like myself. I had such low self-esteem and self-worth, and I started getting trouble with eating. I started getting actually sick in my mind. And maybe I had been for a long time, I'm not really sure. But I started developing very strange things. And the relationships I formed, I did have friends, but they were not good. I wasn't being very truthful, and I was making up things to make myself look better, to make myself look more fun and more. I just wanted to lure in people to be friends with me, and that's because I didn't love myself. I just wanted to lure them in so they couldn't go anywhere anymore. And that's pretty messed up, I know. So I had these weird relationships with friends, and there were some other things at the time that made my behavior very strange, which I will not get into. But point is, my sadness was getting worse, and this continued until I went to study music, which was a relief because the people there were all a little weird and different, and I felt like I fit in more, but my issues started getting worse as well. And when, just before the introduction week of me studying music, we found out my mother was really sick. And she had been sick for such a long time, but we just didn't know what it was. And I remember her being sick for as long as I can remember. And she had always had issues with her health and also her mental health. She had been struggling with depression, I found out way later, and some other issues that I think I now know, but I'm not going to get into because she's not around to defend herself or talk about it herself, so I'm not going to fill anything in for her. But she was really sick. She had cancer, and the doctors told us she had been having cancer for a long time, and they just didn't know. And actually from that point on, my parents weren't really honest to me. So they told me that she had to get surgery and that everything would be fine and she would be okay. Later I found out that wasn't the case with the type of cancer she had. But I'll get into that later. So she got cancer, she got surgery, and the doctors told us, at least that's what I heard, that she was clean of cancer cells and she had to go through some chemotherapy just to make sure that everything was being clean. So she did. She got really sick from chemo. It was a hard time, and I started school and everything was messed up. I was still this sad kid I was 17 at the time when I started, and I was this sad kid with such a low self-esteem. I didn't know anything of the world, and my mom was very sick, and the music industry is so rough, and I was so highly emotional and so highly sensitive. That's also a reason that I didn't have a lot of friends all the time, because I was just crying so quickly as a kid. I was just so sensitive. People didn't understand. And I understand that they didn't, because it's not normal. And in a while, when she finished chemotherapy and I went on with school, I struggled at school. It's not like I failed, but I struggled and I couldn't find my identity. I didn't know who I was. I had very, very strong preferences in music, but they were throwing me all over the place. I was being thrown into things I didn't like, I didn't want, and I just couldn't say no. I didn't know what I did want, so everything was so confusing. And through that all, I was also very sad all the time. And my suicidal thoughts kept coming. I've been having them since I was 8, that first depression that I got. And they were still there, going in and out of my mind. And I was going up and down all the time. And then when my mom finished the chemos, the doctor said she was actually cured. So I felt relieved, and I thought everything was okay now. But my parents didn't tell me everything, so I went on with school, struggled my way through it, and then after half a year or anything, I think it was in fall or winter, we got the news that the cancer was back and there wasn't anything they could do anymore. And because she had surgery, the cancerous cells were just spread out through her entire stomach because they couldn't attach to any places anymore. And the only thing they could do was prolong her life with chemo. So that was really hard, because it had always been my biggest fear. And I'm not lying, it was my biggest fear that my mom would die or leave me in any way, but death was the ultimate fear. I just couldn't live without her, and our bond was just so strong, and I just got so scared. And my parents were Christians, they were believers, we've always been to church, and even though I didn't really feel any connection to God or felt like I belonged there, I didn't really feel at home, this church was important for me. And not because I had a relationship with God, but just because I wanted those people to like me as well. I always wanted people to like me, and I went to church and I prayed and I did things, but I never really experienced God in any way. Sometimes I thought I did, but I wasn't sure, and at this time people from church came to pray for my mom, and it was so great. It was so nice of them to do that, and it was so... I really felt stronger because of that. I really felt like God was present at that moment, at that time. But I never really understood God, and I never really wanted to, I guess, because I didn't like Christian music. I didn't like anything Christian people did out of religion. I didn't like their ways. I didn't like their attitudes. And that's not to judge anyone, but there were just people that disappointed me. And it wasn't God. I know that now. But anyway, my mom got sicker, and even though we prayed and she didn't give up and she really battled against the cancer from her perspective of God, she eventually died. And I didn't understand at the time. I still don't understand why she died, why it was necessary for her to die, because God could have cured her. But now I think it must have been anything to do with protecting her from more suffering, from more pain. But I don't know. I'm just being really honest. I don't know. And it's still very hard for me. Because I loved her so much. And when she died, just a very weird period came. Weird period of time where my dad and I suddenly were alone, and we never really bonded the way I bonded with my mom. So it was weird. It was hard. I was so sad. And then a couple of things happened between us, and my dad made a couple of choices, and I made a couple of choices, and I'm not going to get into that. But some very bad things happened, and I decided to move away from home for the first time. And I was 19 at this point, and I decided to move away. And I decided after the summer vacation, because my mom passed away in May. And I decided after the vacation I would start school again. It was way too soon, but at the time I thought I needed the distraction and I needed the people and the partying, because I really started partying after that, and drinking alcohol and, well, living like there was no tomorrow, to talk in a cliche. But I did, and I moved in with 3 of these beautiful girls. Now I know how special they were, but at the time I really couldn't share anything. I was depressed, I was sad, my dad had hurt me so bad, and everything was so wrong, and I was in such a dark place. And throughout time I had been getting more and more down, until I was in a place that suicidal thoughts really took over my mind and were just there every day. And I was so sad, and I was in such a dark place. I didn't sleep anymore than a couple of hours. Sometimes I didn't sleep at all. I got so tired, but I started drinking heavily and making choices that were very bad at the time. But I do understand why I did, because I just wanted to numb my feelings of not wanting to live anymore, and all my feelings of sadness, and they were so intense. I just started giving up on everything. And when I look back, there were so many warning signs that some things mentally were not okay. I was hurting myself. I was developing very unhealthy habits of coping with feelings. And I was just so sad all the time and feeling lonely, and well, it just got worse after my mom died. And then I came to a point that I dropped out of school. I didn't finish because it was too hard. School was too hard for me at that time. It was so rough. They were so tough on me that I couldn't deal with it anymore, next to all the other things I had to deal with. And I didn't really deal with the grief I had for my mom, and with all of these feelings, I just started running away from them, doing things that I should better have not done. And then came a time where I went back home when I dropped out of school, and I met my current boyfriend, who is still here. That's cool. And we had a rough start, but I knew that I had to stick with him, so I did. And he stayed by my side because everything started getting really, really dark. Really dark. I started spiraling out of control. I started having these episodes that I wasn't really present in my mind. I don't really know how to explain. The psychiatrist actually told me I had a mild psychotic episode, and there were many more of similar things happening. That I was laying in bed, not really capable of talking or responding to anything, and I was just in a different place. I can't really explain it, but it was very, very hard for me, but also for my boyfriend and for other people around me. I could just be in a place with people and just stand up and walk away, not watching where I was going or looking at anyone or saying anything, and I would just leave and not being able to respond. And people got really scared sometimes, and I did too, because when I started opening up the well I had been closing for so long, everything started boiling and it just exploded. And because of the explosion and everything came out at the same time, my brain just had to survive. It was too much, and my brain just started saying nope and leaving, if that makes sense. So I just wasn't present anymore. And everything started getting worse. My depression started getting worse. Everything was in such a dark place. And I came to a point that my suicidal thoughts just took over. And I decided I wanted to die and not continue this anymore. And I started making plans, and I started thinking about it more, and I started feeling this weird kind of peace with the fact that I was going to die, to take my own life. I was getting this weird sense of acceptance and peace with me making that choice of not wanting to live anymore. And that was really weird, but also very peaceful, to be honest. I found peace in the thought of not wanting to live anymore. And it was just a matter of time, and it was just a matter of how I could do that, and how I could achieve that peace. I know many people think that someone who commits suicide is very selfish. And now, when I look back, I see that my mind was only focused on me because that was the only thing I could. I had no choice. It wasn't like I said to myself, well, I'm going to just think about me, and I'm in a dark place, and I don't want to live anymore, so I'm being selfish right now, just thinking about me. No, I had no choice. People who commit suicide are desperate and in a dark place, and they just want relief and peace. And that, if that is anything, it's not selfish, it's just a tragedy. And I was at that place. And then I knew something had to happen. I had been on medication as well. My psychiatrist put me on antidepressants, antipsychotics, and those made me feel so bad, physically but mentally as well. And I kept my job during all of this. I was still working because I didn't want anyone to see what was going on. Many people don't know I was in such a dark place at that time because I wanted to make it look like I was fine. And I started gaining a lot of weight, and everything just got a lot worse from the medication. It helped at first, just for a little bit, because I was in such a low place that it just took the first little bump that I could get over that. But in the end, I just decided I didn't want it anymore, and it was enough, and I couldn't take it. I couldn't take any more. And when I made this decision a couple of times, it has been very hard, especially for my boyfriend who experienced everything. And I'm so sorry for him having to go through all that. It has been a little selfish, but you can't call someone going through all that selfish. That's just a side note. Then something happened, and God had already showed his face a couple of times. Not literally, but he had been there, and he had been saving me from some things. And because it was a very confusing time, I don't really remember everything that happened. But I do remember some things that were the turning points, and God really transformed the darkness and the very bad place I was in into the opposite, like the Bible says. So he literally did that for me. So I remember reconnecting with some childhood friends that I hadn't seen in a long time, and they had found God recently again, and they invited me to their church. And I thought, well, okay, it was quite a big deal for me to go, because I left everything that I knew of God and the concept of God, and I didn't want it anymore, because I thought, God didn't save me from this. He didn't protect me against this. Why would I want such a God that didn't even shield me from what I have been going through for so long? I had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, PTSD, and depression. Why didn't God heal me from that? So my thing between me and God wasn't really on good terms, but I still decided I wanted to go. And my boyfriend came with me, even though he wasn't believing in God or anything. And so I went, and the service was nice, but I was so actually blind for everything good that was going on. And then afterwards, there was a man who who came to me and asked if he could pray for me. And I didn't tell him anything, but he was praying for my depression. I didn't tell him, but now I know God has told him to come to me and pray for that. And so he prayed for me, and at first I didn't think much of it. I didn't really think anything would happen, to be honest. And then something did happen. It felt like someone screwed open my head and took something out of it, just literally. It didn't hurt or anything, but I felt a relief, and I felt so much lighter, and I felt like I could see clearly again, because there was this thing before my eyes that made me see unclear for so long, and it just went away. And after that, later I found out that this man has been given a gift from God to pray for depression and set people free from depression. But I was set free that day from my depression, and I did relapse, but it never went that dark as it was before. I never got that deep as I did before. And I started getting a little better. And I remember these childhood friends inviting me to another place where they kept healing services for people who need physical or mental or healing of some sort. And I went there, and I just had this feeling of belonging there, and people were so friendly and welcoming, and I felt at home, just like I felt at the church where the man prayed for my depression. Nothing bad against my old church, but it was bigger, and even though the people were so nice and they really saw me and they tried, it wasn't my home. I didn't feel at home. And that is my personal thing. It's got nothing to do with that church or that they aren't good or doing their job or no. I just felt better here. And I started going to those. And I had been struggling with physical illnesses as well. I had chronic pain, I had chronic fatigue, and there were some other things. I had a lot of things going on physically. And I started getting relief from that as well. God touched me every time they prayed for me, and I just couldn't run away anymore. And I started getting better. I got cured from borderline personality disorder. And people in the medical world will tell you that's impossible. And it is. But I got cured because God set me free from that. I never expected anything like that. But it happened, and I'm not really going to get into details because I have experienced some almost magical things with God. He is so amazing. I cannot think of another word. And now we're at the point that I just want to sing for him, and I want to be with him and talk with him. I can talk with God anytime I want. And chances are, if you know me, I'll be praying for you, if you want to or not. I don't want to force anything upon anyone. I don't want to make it feel like I'm pushing you to go to God, but I'm just telling you what he did for me. And it's special because I never thought I would get out of that. I never thought I would change, especially when I got the diagnosis of borderline and PTSD, and I thought, okay, this is something I'll be struggling with my entire life. And I just got ready for it. I prepared for it. And then God set me free. He delivered me from so many things, from my past, from things that happened. And in the period that followed, it got better and better and better, just step by step by step. Just like it did before, because I went through intense therapy. I did a lot of things, and I got a little bit better every time. But now the steps were just a little bit bigger. So every time I went up a step, the steps were bigger than they were before. And I just cannot understand anything yet, but that God has saved me. And He loves me. He loves me so much that He just pulled me out of that. And my boyfriend has given his heart to God as well, because he started seeing what God was doing for me. He was having trouble seeing the hope for me. And I understand, because my situation came to a point that it looked pretty hopeless. But there is hope. And if you're struggling with any of this and you feel connected to my story in any way, you can send me a message. You can tell me. I will listen to you. I can pray for you. I can do whatever you want. So I just wanted to tell you that there is hope. And I know it sounds cliche, and I was so allergic to cliches for so long, but I started loving them in a way that there are some cliches that are true, and you can't get around them. And God wants to help you if you're struggling with something. So just let me know. I just wanted to share this with you. And even though there are some dark parts, and I haven't told you everything because I can't, it would be too long, it would be too much. There are so many things I cannot even tell you yet. But for now, this is my testimony. This is what God did for me, and He wants to do it for you. And because of the sacrifice of Jesus, I have been set free from everything I was struggling with. And He wants to cure you. He wants to heal you. He wants you to feel good. Oh, I just got startled. My dog is barking. That's okay. So just let me know, and thank you for listening. It might have been a bit chaotic, but I am chaotic after all. So God never wanted to change me. He just wanted to keep me the way I was, without all the negativity and depression and everything I was struggling with. He just wanted me for me, and He wanted me to be okay. So that's everything. Thanks again for listening, and I hope this can be meaningful for you in your situation. Bye.